what has happened. On December 16th, the United States House of Representatives and the Senate both passed their final versions of the National Defense Authorization Act, or H.R. 1540. And what's amazing about this is that this represents just such an attack on the Constitution. It represents a stripping away of rights, God-given rights. What this is a traitorous act that has been passed. This is all part of this police state, this control grid that is being put in place, that is to go against those who speak against this tyrannical system, this tyrannical government. And I'm just wondering, when are people going to wake up and see what is truly happening in the nation? You see, the government no longer fears its people. And when that happens, tyranny will reign supreme.
This last week, the U.S. Congress passed a bill which repeals Combatants, which means that we have now institutionalized and codified martial law. Right now, the battle against terrorism involves all of us. Everybody in this country is a potential terrorist. And the words that they use in there to bring everybody in as a potential terrorist is any associated forces, which means that if you happen to visit a website, happen to attend a meeting, happen to do one association, you can be accused of being a terrorist, and the bill says you have no right to a lawyer. They've been abusive of this for many years, but now it's been codified. And this president, just about a year ago, announced that some of these bad people, even though they're American citizens, don't deserve even charges, that they can now be assassinated. We should be consciously aware of terrorism and deal with it, but to say that we're at war with the world and we can send a drone missile and send our troops any place we want is very, very dangerous. Endless wars, attack on civil liberties. This Patriot Act is not very patriotic, let me tell you. It's an invasion of your privacy, and I often wonder how many members of Congress would have voted for the Patriot Act if it would have been called the repeal of the Fourth Amendment. Big government is alive and well, but the grassroots are waking up.
I think that denigrates the very foundation of this country. It denigrates the Bill of Rights. It denigrates what our founders intended.
Under the provisions, would it be possible that an American citizen then could be declared an enemy combatant and sent to Guantanamo Bay and detained indefinitely?
I think that as long as that individual, no matter who they are, if they pose a threat to the security of the United States of America, should not be allowed to continue that threat.
Barack Obama, what are your thoughts on the Declaration and Constitution?
You know, I think it's a remarkable document. I think
which one?
The original Constitution, as well as the Civil War amendments. But I think it is an imperfect document, and I think it is a document that reflects some deep flaws in American culture. I think it is an imperfect document. I think it is an imperfect document.
All right, this is Pastor Ray Toman, and I am with Stuart Rhodes from Oath Keepers. Once again, we are truly blessed to have him on the show today, and I really wanted to bring him on tonight because we have got to address this NDAA bill that just went through the House and Senate. And to me, this is one of the most treasonous bills that have been passed in my lifetime, and I think within the history of this nation. So let's welcome Stuart Rhodes to the program. Mr. Rhodes, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, all considered.
You know, it's pretty crazy. Since the last time we've spoken, I mean, there's been so much going on, and just with the assaults from the TSA with the elderly women that we've seen, and it's just it seems like things are just really just quickening in its pace with us going into this police state. And then on the 16th of December, we see that the United States House of Representatives and the Senate both passed the final versions of the National Defense Authorization Act, also known as H.R. 1540. And I just wanted you to give your perspective on that and what this bill means.
Well, what it does is the detention provisions in the National Defense Authorization Act that everyone's upset about, and they should be. What these do is basically say that the United States, the American people and the United States will be treated precisely the same as Iraq or Afghanistan when it comes to the claim that they can use military detention and military trial on those who are suspected of being Al-Qaeda or Taliban or an associated group or aiding them. And so you might say, well, who cares about that? You know, if you're doing those things, then you deserve to be taken away. Well, the point is that just like with a goat herder in Afghanistan, if they point their finger at you and say, we think he's one of those guys, off you go. They take you to Guantanamo or to some other military brig, and you're not going to get a grand jury indictment, which our Constitution requires. You're not going to get a jury of your peers. And this is all being done under the laws of war. And so they're basically saying that they can treat the American people precisely the same as an occupied enemy nation, a conquered enemy population like Afghanistan and Iraq. There is no legal difference. And this is directly in violation of Article 3 of our Constitution, which mandates a jury trial for all crimes. And the treason clause of Article 3 is very clear about what is done to an American accused of making war against his own country or aiding the enemy. It requires a trial for treason. And that requires two witnesses to the overt act in a public trial in front of a jury of your peers. They're very, very clear about that. So it's a direct violation of the treason clause, and of course it violates the entire Bill of Rights, 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments in particular. So this is a huge crossing of the Rubicon. This is exactly the same thing the founders faced. You look at the Declaration of Independence, they list there among the causes for taking up arms and separating from England, one of them was denial of jury trial. The next one was the attempt to make the military superior to the civil power. Another one was the attempt to subject them to a jurisdiction foreign to their constitution. And what they were talking about was they would use admiralty courts against Americans. They would use courts of admiralty, which were military tribunals,
Right.
Rather than jury trials. They would take them for trial over to England, across the seas, to England for trial. And that was the jurisdiction foreign to their constitution that they were applying to them. This is much the same. There's nothing more foreign to our constitution than the international laws of war. And their claim is that those trump the Bill of Rights. So you should look at this as a declaration of war on the American people. They're treating you like an occupied enemy nation, and that is what they're telling you, is they can do the same thing to you as they do to Iraq.
I thought the Patriot Act was bad, but this is just unbelievable what's going on. Senator Lindsey Graham, who I consider at this point to be a traitor, he said, and I quote, the homeland is part of the battlefield. People can be held without trial, whether an American citizen or not. And what really gets me, Stuart, is that, over the past so many generations, or decades, we've been so indoctrinated. We have been so led away from what the Constitution means. And what's happening now is people are just allowing this to happen based on their feelings. The Constitution is not just to be upheld when it's convenient or it's advantageous for us. The Constitution must be held at all costs, even if it goes against our own feelings. It sounds so good to put people that are American citizens that we deem terrorists in jail without a trial. That sounds great, but we're not looking at the ramifications as it has on people like you, Stuart, or people like me that, we speak against the government, what the government's doing, because it's a tyrannical government right now. Could you or I one day be in jeopardy of being called a traitor and being placed in jail? What do you think about that, Stuart?
Well, of course. This is precisely the same kind of legal regime that the Nazis set up, or were set up by the communists in Stalinist Russia. If they point a finger at you and you're gone. they don't have to prove to a judge they have probable cause. They don't have to prove to a grand jury. They don't have to do any of those things. They just take you away on their say-so alone. So Obama could point his finger at you and say, I think that you are the enemy. And you'll say, well, no, I'm not. Well, bad. You're off to Guantanamo. And once you're in that system, you can go tell it to a military judge. A military judge will use a standard called preponderance of the evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt, as our jury system uses. He'll instead use preponderance of the evidence, and he'll say, well, based upon the secret evidence I see in front of me, and you can counter that by saying, well, judge, I didn't do those things. And he'll say, well, I find that the parts of the evidence, I find that you did. And so there you sit, stay there. And it says very clearly right there in the statute that you could be held for the duration of the conflict. So just on the say-so alone, the president, you can be held for the duration of the conflict, and if they want to, they can also try you for supposed violations of the laws of war. And so, this is precisely the same kind of system that the Nazis and the communists set up. And you'd be a fool to think this is not going to be used against political enemies of the state. That's the whole point of an arbitrary system like that. And the founders, they made it very clearly that when you combine all of the powers of government, judicial, executive, and legislative, in one set of hands, that is the very definition of tyranny, is what Madison said in the Fellow's Papers. And that's the whole point of the Bill of Rights, is to have a final barrier between you and the government is the jury of your peers. It's an ancient right. It goes back 700 friggin' years in English history. And it was one of the reasons our forefathers fought the Revolution, was because of denial of jury trial. Forget about taxation representation. That wasn't the biggest issue. Violations of their due process rights, and especially jury trial, was one of the biggest things they were fighting for.
Yeah, that's so true. And Stuart, what's really getting me is I've been speaking to a lot of people about this issue and about, us going into this police state and this the tyrannical system that we have in place right now. And people are still looking at me like I'm speaking a foreign language, like I'm nuts. And, and I just want to put this out to you because I don't understand. The evidence is in front of people. I mean, we are seeing senators, Congress people that are clearly making statements that are against the Constitution. Why aren't people waking up like I think that they should be? I mean, our founding fathers would not have stood for this. Could you see Paul Revere or any of those kind of guys going through a TSA checkpoint? I mean, I couldn't see that. That wouldn't be possible. What's wrong with this nation right now, Stuart? I mean, do you have any understanding of? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
One thing to think about, though, is that as the Declaration makes very clear, they went through a long train of abuses. All of those things were done by statute, and they didn't rebel at the very first one. They waited, and they used all their peaceful remedies. And so, even the founding generation, it took 12, 15 years for them to finally get to the point where they had exhausted all of the remedies and they had to fight back. The denial of jury trial was done by statute. The expansion of the jurisdiction of the courts of admiralty was done by statute. The law that allowed them to be taken across the seas and tried by England was under a separate statute that was put in place. So it was one after another putting the pieces in place, and that's why the Declaration says when a long train of abuses evidences intention to place us under absolute despotism. So they said, hey, look, they saw one after another being put in place, and they said this can be for no other reason than to strip us of our rights and rule over us in a despotic way. And they finally had to fight back. And so, I'm not letting people off the hook entirely. I'm just saying that just because people aren't up in arms over this right this second doesn't mean that it's a lost cause, that they won't wake up. It may take a long train of abuses, which we've already suffered, and we're suffering right now. So I still have faith that we'll be able to wake the American people up. And of course, the other problem we have is widespread ignorance of our own history and our own Constitution.